alcohol was my solution. And I didn't use it all the time. I mean, the opportunity wasn't there until later in life, but I knew how that made me feel. That was my go-to when things got bad. It was because I didn't feel comfortable in my own skin. There's two ways my life could have gone. I could have gone on to feel uncomfortable in every living situation and not been a productive member of society.
Yep.
And, it's not gotten a good job and kind of stayed in the downtrodden way of life. But instead, I decided to full bore go. You know what I mean? Like because my parents instilled that in me, right?
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Jennifer.
And I'm Ashlee. Jennifer, I'll hand it to you. I'm always the one being like, special guest. So you got this.
Way to put me on the spot. So we have a special guest with us, Marian Cosgrove, who I'm excited to be here. And so Marian, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am an Army veteran. Of course, I'm old. So when I was in the Army, it was back before the wartime, the Cold War era. But 10 years active duty Army MP. I stayed on with my kids for a little bit, but then I got into law enforcement. So I've been in law enforcement now for 22 years.
22 years.
Oh, it makes me feel old. I'm young at heart.
It's incredible. Honestly, you are.
Yeah.
Marian's in much better shape than I will ever be. So we're just going to put that one out there. So thank you for coming on today. One of the biggest things, so obviously being a clinician and then working with first responders, something that we do see often, Jennifer, pipe up to, is substance abuse. It's not something that we can kind of work, like we can't say it doesn't happen. It happens in this field all the time. And you just have an incredible story and an incredible way to kind of talk about that. So I'm just going to first ask you, what are your thoughts? Is it more prevalent than what people think, substance abuse in first responder world?
So coping with alcohol or substances is extremely common. We want to stifle our emotions. We're supposed to be the one in control of the scene and there for people's worst day of their life and take charge and solve the crime and support these people. So we can't show emotion when we're in the middle. And so when we leave that scene and we have to go home and be the mom or the dad and play with our kids and listen to our spouse talk about the dog thrown up on the carpet. That was the worst thing that's happened to him all week. We just can't handle that. You know what I mean? We're like, what do you mean that's the thing? So we want to numb ourselves. And one of the ways to numb yourself is definitely with alcohol. It's legal, right?
It is legal.
Yeah.
It is. And it's kind of pushed.
Oh, it's socially acceptable.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have that choir practice at the end of shift,
I was just about to say that. It's that end of shift, even our overnights going to the bar. So, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's normalized. It's like, we had a bad day. Let's go grab a drink.
But is that always wrong?
No, I wouldn't say so.
No, I wouldn't either. So. It's when we let it monopolize our life. We needed that numbing mechanism to be there is our mainstay. That's our best friend. That's the solution to the emotions, our go-to, our ride or die. That's when it becomes a problem. But even then, some people who cope in that manner can stop or moderate given sufficient reason, health issues, or the wife says, I've had it. The husband says, that's enough. The kids are looking at you like, really? But there's a line there. There's a line that if you cross it, those what seems like sufficient reasons to stop or moderate don't work, and you can't help yourself to continue to cope that way. That's when there's a huge problem.
I appreciate that. And I, in a past life, did work with substance abuse. And it's interesting in our diagnostic manual, which is what clinicians use to diagnose. If you were to look up what causes someone to be alcoholic or an addict, if you look at that in terms of our diagnostic manual, it is not a black and white diagnosis. And so I think you're exactly right in saying there is the line. And in a clinical standpoint, the line is if you're having issues in relationships if you're having issues with your job if you're having issues in other interpersonal relations, if you get legal charge, there has to kind of check all these in order to be an alcoholic. And that's actually something that I would do with clients back in the day of handing them kind of, hey, this is what an outline. So is somebody that comes home and has a glass of wine every night after work is alcoholic? There's some people that would say absolutely yes. Some people would say absolutely no. And it's like, well, is it impacting these areas?
Right.
And that is something that I think is so unique, right? Because what might not impact somebody's vocational job for other people's that would have an impact on their job. And so it's navigate.
Because you can have a clinical diagnosis of these things, but for me, I had to analyze myself internally and be honest myself. That was the key point. My subconscious mind would want to fool myself. Like, I don't have a drinking problem. If you had the problems I had or seen the things I did, you'd drink too,
Yeah.
just to
Yeah.
numb it away. But it's when you can't stop, when those things start building up, all those things that you talked about aren't sufficient enough to cause you to moderate or to stop. That's when you really need to look at it and see. Because a heavy, hard drinker can look just like an alcoholic,
Exactly.
but to be an alcoholic, it's a whole different ballgame.
Well, I appreciate that self-reflection piece that, it has to come with like looking inward because, you could give people a piece of paper and say like, well, you check all these boxes, but if they're not looking inward, they could give you all the
Yeah.
reasons
Oh,
that
yeah.
they're not,
And
checking
believe
those boxes.
in
Oh,
themselves.
believe it.
Yes.
They really do sometimes believe it, right?
Would you be willing to share a little bit about what that self-reflection looked like for you? What it to be on yourself look like?
Yes. And I have to say that those things that I had to self-reflect had to do with how I coped with hard times all of my life. I mean, that's really where it started. I'm a compartmentalized person. So when I go through things, I just want to put it in an imaginary box on an imaginary shelf and shove it way back there and pretend like it didn't happen.
Way back.
Because, yes, way back. Because it really does. What I would say is, does it really matter today? Like right here today, does it matter that these things have happened to me? But the thing is, I wasn't being honest with myself on all those issues. And my hard things in life started early. They started really early. I think those hard things as a child made me the police officer I am today. The person that wanted to solve problems for people and not have them go down the same roads that I went down. It made me a good cop.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And the more I'm around police officers that have gone through the journey of mental health, wellness, trying to get well and clean themselves out, have the same attributes, that things in their life weren't always the best. We didn't grow up in these perfect environments and then just wanted to be a police officer.
Yeah.
It happens, but not very often.
And I think you make that great point. I feel like we've been talking today prior to recording, right? And it's this notion of we often like to say that our childhood and things that happen don't really matter, right? Like,
Right.
oh, it's not a big deal. This is the present moment. I hear that all the time in my office.
I don't want to dig that up again.
Not exactly, right? Why would I? I'm fine now. And I get it. I do get that mindset. And it's really, really hard to sometimes one just even face and acknowledge that those things happened in your childhood, right? But then to do that work,
Yeah.
right? But yet, as a clinician, it's so important for us to say, well, it dictates why you do what you do, right? Like it can, and it can make us definitely kind of view life in different ways. And obviously without that, we don't learn and we don't grow as kids. That's just what it is. We learn from our environment and the people that are raising us, right? So it's really, really hard to not focus back in on that. I get a lot of shit, I'm gonna be honest, from my first responders when I try to get to their their past. They're always like, why do clinicians do this? They give me a hard time. Such a cliche therapist, Ashlee. I'm like, well, let's work on it and let's see. And if you trust in me, after this, if it doesn't make a difference, then you can come back and give me that shit. But I think you make a really, really great point in that. And a lot of our first responders do not love to dive into that childhood.
No.
Well, and I think, we were having this conversation last night when we have or an experience. I have a client who is able to say, hey, I had it happen in my childhood. And so there's like an openness about that, which is amazing. You're recognizing, hey, there's some stuff that happened in my childhood that was ideal, but that's it. Like, it's just a surface answer. And I love what you said about like how I was coping from then. And so it's again, which is great when people are open and honest. But again, it's just like, well, how do those things impact how you cope? How do those things impact how you the world? There's all these things that can be really impactful for that. And talking about it doesn't build it to change those. I really wish I could. And yet I think it's powerful to look and say that makes sense on how to respond in that. You compartmentalize a lot of people, including myself at times. And there can be some healthy compartmenting in life. There absolutely can be. I think sometimes therapy can be quick to put stuff as good and bad instead of recognize like a good and bad of those things. How do you feel like you cope differently?
Now I can listen to outside people telling me how I'm responding to something. I can, somebody says, well, you don't look right. Are you okay? Or why did you respond in this way? Or that's not your norm. And instead of getting defensive and feeling judged, I can actually then say, oh, wow, they're noticing something in me. what am I feeling like the cause of these things are, and kind of self-reflect in a manner that's not so judgmental. Because that's me. I beat myself up all the time. I'm my own worst critic. It's like I have a judge, a jury in my head that keeps finding myself guilty and sentencing myself to all of this negativity over and over and over.
what a
You
good
know, there's no reason to feel negative about stuff. There's all we have to do is make slight changes in life. And in fact, that's why I think we're here. I think we're here to use these experiences that are catalysts for growth, these rough spots, to send us in a slightly different trajectory. I don't have to do a 180 immediately. I just have to do a little bit different and then see how that works out. And a little bit different after that until I eventually add those up and it is a 180. You know, I can see how to fix these things in life instead of trying to numb them or push them back on that shelf or ignore them and just keep trudging forward.
You know, I appreciate that reflection in terms of it.
Yeah.
When often was I need to be 100, I just need to be 180, I just need to be 100, instead of recognizing what they really do.
Right. And sometimes people outside of us can see them faster than we can see them, you know?
I think a lot of the times, right? And that's for any one of us at any given time.
Yeah.
Like, just because I'm a clinician does not mean that does not happen to me too. Like people are able to identify things. It's because it's harder to see it. It's harder to self-reflect for sure. So when I want to make sure that our listeners here kind of I don't want to put you on the spot with your background story, like the full story, because that's up to you and what you want to share. But when did you, or how long did you go before you recognized like, hey, I might need to make some changes. I might need to.
Decades. I went
Decades, okay,
decades
okay.
before I realized I needed a change. And I don't mind telling some of my background story.
Okay.
And here's the thing. I had a very significant childhood trauma. So when I had great parents, I mean, they raised us good. My mom was my moral compass. She stayed home and she made sure that we did things right in life, you know, and they made us happy and did all the good things. But when I was 7, I was brutally attacked by a random person, and I'm a survivor of that. But when I went to the hospital and I had surgery, I had a head injury and I had been sexually assaulted, and I tried to tell my mom all these things. My mom told me I was safe. My mom told me that it was going to be okay, that everything was fine. And because of the head trauma, who knows at 7 how I even explained that, but she said due to the head trauma I was having these nightmares and that it was all okay. And my mom did the best she could at that moment. You know, whether she knew it or didn't know it, or I wasn't making any sense, my mom kept me safe and protected. But because I was not heard, I was alone with that hurt.
Yeah.
Because I had no outlet for it. I kept that inside. And it consequently made me feel like I didn't fit in anywhere. I felt like if I was lying to myself that this event occurred, because there was a story, you know what I mean, that I fell in the cement and hurt my head and all these things. If that was true and not what I was thinking it was, then what kind of person am I? You know,
Yeah.
I don't deserve this family. I don't deserve to have this life. I felt like I didn't fit in anywhere. And I was alone with my pain. I mean, that was it. And it was very awkward. And that went on for years of me feeling this way, even though I was safe and protected with this beautiful family.
Right, right.
And it went on for years. And the solution to that solution that took that weirdness away was alcohol. I remember being a young teen and we all got together at my parents' house, lake house, and they were all, you know, at somebody else's. And so we all got together. We were mixing stuff from the liquor cabinet and everybody would take a little swig and go, oh, you know, that was crazy. I drank it like a fish. I drank it until I was throwing up, passed out on the floor with the room spinning. But the whole time that I was drinking that, thinking, oh my gosh, I'm comfortable in my own skin.
Yeah.
For the first time ever, I feel like I'm okay. And I'm not saying I was an alcoholic at that point. At that point, alcohol was my solution. And I didn't use it all the time. I mean, the opportunity wasn't there until later in life. But I knew how that made me feel. You know, that was my go-to when things got bad. It was. Because I didn't feel comfortable in my own skin, there's 2 ways my life could have gone. I could have gone on to feel uncomfortable in every living situation and not been a productive member of society.
Yep.
And, you know, it's not gotten a good job and kind of stayed in the downtrodden way of life. But instead, I decided to full bore go. You know what I mean? Like because my parents instilled that in me, right?
Yep.
You're a success in life of what you make of it. So you need to do this thing.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and so that drive for success was on based on what they gave me. But again, never feeling like I deserved it.
You know what I think is really crucial to to point out here is how those negative thoughts towards yourself from an event that you could not control manifested. I don't think people take enough time to stop to realize that when we go through something as traumatic as that, how we turn inward, right? Like we just hear these traumatic events, and from the outside, as I think we all make our own judgments or what have you, but how that manifested for you, how you turn that inward so much, and you're like, I don't even want to be in my own skin,
Yeah.
right? And not enough people stop to realize that this is what happens,
Yeah.
right? This is what leads, because I think we also, you are extremely resilient, and the path you took was incredible, but we do see so many people take that other path. But how quickly, when all you're feeding yourself are these negative thoughts like that,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's important, especially because we have a lot of first responders that listen to this. If it's not them, the people you work with in your communities, right? Like being aware of that. I thought you just put that so perfectly. I'm like, oh my gosh, well, I learn from you every time I see you. But yeah, the way you just said that, I'm like, how beautifully said that, because it's hard to articulate that, how that can manifest for somebody.
And it doesn't have to be a serious event like what happened to me. Being alone with your pain, period, as a
Right.
child,
Right.
because think about it, you're born with a clean slate, aren't you? Like you don't have all these things. Now I'm explaining this in a cop terminology, okay,
Which
y'all?
we love.
Yeah.
They're all gonna love it. So probably like, thank goodness, finally.
You mental health professionals and you're breaking down to the brain, but I think of the brain like a computer system. Okay. So it uses past experience to predict what I'm going to do in the current moment to keep me safe. Like the brain keeps me safe. So my egoic brain puts all these boundaries on it. Like I'm going to keep people at arm's length, or I'm going to judge them before they judge me. I'm going to do all these things to keep myself safe from these events that we're alone with as a child. And it could be something small. It could be a divorce. I say small, these aren't small, but a divorce or having somebody in your family pass away as a young child. All these things that we're alone with our hurt and we feel like we can't share with anybody can cause the same thing that happened to me. And if I never share those things, that's when I have to find an outside source to quell them.
Yeah.
And if it's substances, it's a long road. Like it's a long, hard road, especially when you feel like you have your life on track. I didn't fall into that downtrodden form. I personally was going to make a success out of my life.
Yes.
But I gave 110% at everything. But the problem with that is there's no such thing as 110%, right? 100% is a full circle. Like that's it. Like that's the whole thing. But because I wanted to give 110%, anything I did to myself was nothing. Like I was in the Army. So if I could max my PT test, I would fit in, Oh, but I could have extended scale maxed, I could have done more sit-ups. So anything I did, if I got on a SRT team in the Army, the first female ever to do that. And I didn't do it because I was a female. I just, I could do this. And for once I would fit in with the rest of the soldiers. I would be a soldier. But instead it wasn't good enough. You know what I mean? Like I felt like I could have done something better. The guys outran me or did the shot better than me or whatever. But the whole time I got on the team. I did it. I never still felt like I fit in until I would go with the guys and have a couple drinks, and then I would be one of them, To me, that's what that warm blanket was. But I didn't recognize that. It wasn't like it was a go-to immediately, but it felt like this. The problem with coping with alcohol for such a long period of time is it's actually a bodily dysfunction. I damaged my liver and pancreas to the point where it didn't get rid of the byproducts like normal people. Normal people take a drink and through breath or urine or whatever, they get rid of these extra chemicals in there, where mine retain those and it causes a craving for more alcohol. And so my true intention is to go out with the guys and drink a beer, after work or whatever.
Yeah.
One, go home to my family, and do what I'm supposed to do. But when I drink that craving builds. And next thing you know, I'm doing 2 or 3 or drinking with them and then going home and drinking 6 more. And that took, like I said, decades to build up to that point. But that's where I was. That craving for alcohol is not something that you can see. So if I'm allergic to strawberries, I might break out in a rash when I eat strawberries. So you think, oh man, see the rash? But a craving, no one told me that when I was young. And so I didn't recognize it,
Yeah.
And then you talk about the brain part of it. I built a neuro bypass in my brain to solve all solutions with alcohol. So if I was happy, I didn't want to get too happy. out of control. So I would numb it. I would want to numb it with alcohol. That'd be my immediate thought. If I was celebrating something, I wanted to do it with alcohol. If I was sad about something, I wanted to numb it with alcohol. So these neuro bypasses that we build with these solutions are like learning how to ride a bike, right? So when you first get on a bike, you can't pedal, you fall over, but you eventually learn how to do that, and you build a neuro bypass in your brain how to ride a bike. So if you haven't ridden a bike in 10 years, can't you just get on it and ride it?
Yes, you can. I learned that
Yeah.
in Berlin, of all places.
That neuro bypass never goes away. Neither is the alcohol one. So for me wanting to cope with everything with alcohol, to get out of that mindset, I need to build different. I need to learn how to use the emotions properly as a guidance system rather than trying to stuff them into a box and put them on a shelf. And again, unless you're around clinicians or go to therapy, who heard about these neuro bypasses things, but your brain, due to neuroplasticity, can change, it molds into these new ways to cope with things, but that original one doesn't go away, so I have to do things to be able to cope with this in a different way.
Yes. Yeah. I'm smiling so big because when I present, I always talk about that process, right? Neuroplasticity. And my men and women are always like, here she goes again with that word. I'm like, but we can do it.
Play-Doh.
I'm like, I'm just trying to, so I'm smiling because I guarantee they're going to listen to this and be like, oh, that's Ashlee playing out.
Well, and I've said the younger, and I think childhood and adolescence to try things, limits might include alcohol. And I do think culture, still a lot of around as a culture utilize that.
Yeah.
So those are norms, as well as we're born slate. And when we're little and things happen to us, we don't have the whole development, no, it's not my fault, or no, I can share, how to even have the words to express something that's happened to us. And so it can really be just like this layered thing that happens.
Yeah.
And I don't disagree with me here, but I do think though work to find different coping skills. And I think substances, alcohol, it is a quick fix at
It is.
time, and that's why we utilize. And I think you're right. Like I don't think that somebody's had a bad day and they go have a drink and they're an alcoholic.
No.
But at the same time, there is this line that sometimes can cross, and what is happening with our brain when are happening.
Because me feeling like I never fit in, it continues on. And I have not talked to a first responder that doesn't say the same thing I do. Like, so when we show up to the child that drowned in a pool, and our common sense brain tells us that child's been in there for a while, even though I pull that child out and I do life-saving measures and they don't make it. I know in my rational brain that was not my fault. You know what I mean? Like I didn't leave him in the pool. It wasn't the way I did CPR. My subconscious mind says, what mother lets a child drown in a pool? When I say it out loud, it sounds stupid. Like, no, you didn't do that. You did all the things you're supposed to do. But that's subconscious mind, those things that we carry around that don't make any sense, but they just lurk in the back of your brain are powerful. We're supposed to be above the rest of society because we enforce the law. We're supposed to adhere to the law perfectly. None of us are perfect. I fight on the road and look at my speedometer thinking, oh gosh, I gotta slow down. What am I doing? Let alone misusing alcohol. Having that one or two drinks to take the edge off with the guys by yourself, whatever is fine. But when we overshoot that, then that guilt and, I'm supposed to be better than this. I'm not supposed to fall down the stairs or have a fight with my spouse or whatever the case may be that was maybe brought on by that misuse of alcohol that one time. So that guilt, shame, and remorse is a vicious cycle, right?
Which that we can do as humans, a lot of resistance and a lot of pushback and a lot of hiding, and guilt is such a and if there is this pressure, it's like, what are we really having to really work?
And I know you guys both have, your parents were in law enforcement all your life. Your dad or mom, for some people, come home and they're acting kind of distant or grouchy or whatever. It's hard for kids not to internalize that, and make it about themselves and be alone with their hurt too, but the whole time, actually, your dads that were law enforcement were trying to protect you and not tell you about those critical incidents.
100%. I always talk about, there was only 2 times. I mean, he was 29 years, and there was only 2 times he came home. Maybe even one that was really apparent to me where he hugged me and was like, don't ever take our fighting or something as an extreme, and then I found out later what had happened and things like that. But what my dad was notorious for, like coming home and like watching TV but zoning out completely.
Yeah.
So I could be like, dad, 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 and tell him my whole life story, and he would be like, uh-huh, but not even look my way.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and I don't think he knew he was doing it, but that was just his way of like, well, I'm with you guys.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm hanging out, we're watching TV, right? We're doing this and that, but yet he was disengaged. Like I'm sure he's going to listen to this and be like, was? But he was,
Mhm.
and I feel like it is hard as a kid sometimes to be like, okay, is that me? He just doesn't want to listen to me talk. But because as a kid, you don't know any better. So you do internalize that very quickly, very, very quickly. So I love that you hit on that as well.
And then as the law enforcement person, then you feel guilty. Then you want to make up for it, maybe by being too nice and giving presents and doing all the things, because you weren't home enough or you were distracted, or the opposite, pulling away. And there's a wedge,
Yeah, absolutely. I do hear that a lot from our children of first responders. So that's something that's super important as well. And it's not only, I guess I want to also note here, because we're talking right now, right? Like incredible, powerful story about alcohol, but experiences in my own like family life and things like that. Like it's not only alcohol. Like I feel like pain medicines that are given, right, by doctors when our first responders get injured
Yes.
and all these things, they develop, right? So we have all this trauma, we may not be well, but then we have something like that transpire. And man, life just spirals out of control fast sometimes.
Right.
You don't have a way to catch it. Right. And so then we're looking at things a little bit differently. And I want to note that because I think a lot of our listeners, well, they're going to absolutely relate because alcohol is, I think, our number one in terms of first responders and the normalcy around it. But like there's also so many other things that I've come across while working with first responders that it's just like this coping mechanism. If I can find it, I'm going to do it.
Yeah. And it could be anything.
Right.
It's not
right.
just alcohol and
Talk about porn
substances.
addiction, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a huge one.
huge one.
And it's people hide it. So it's not in your face. So you think you're the only one.
Mhm.
Spending money you don't have.
Spending money. Oof.
Yes.
That's a big one.
Yes. And then you feel like you have to work all these overtime jobs to make up for the loss of income that you're spending, or that you get used to living in this house that's above your means, or driving these cars that you can't afford. But you ever notice when you get one of those things, like, I want that car, and you get it, and then not even 3 days later, it feels normal again. So you're seeking, it's a dopamine hit that you're just constantly going after that never stops. And that's what alcohol is, like that's what it is. You just keep seeking and seeking and seeking. And what used to work to make me feel numb or feel like I fit in, all of a sudden is this grand giant thing where it used to just be a couple drinks, it just escalates and you don't even realize.
It is hard, and I see that often with clients, the runway run. What we were
Yeah,
using to
that.
get that plane off the ground, that gets shorter, and like you're having to escalate more until again it feels so out of control.
And as alcohol spiraled my life, it kind of did it incrementally. So conditions in my life got worse and worse on a slow basis. So think of an elevator going down slowly. So conditions in my life would get worse. Like I would never drink in the morning. Are you kidding me? Like that's an alcoholic. They got to get up and drink. Oh, but I'm off and I'm watching Food Network and they drink mimosas in the morning. So why
Who
can't
was it?
I?
What was that show? What's her name? Hoda?
Hoda?
Hoda.
Good Morning
Good
America.
Morning
Yeah,
America.
champagne.
Popping the champagne all the time.
Yeah. So what's wrong with that? So that's incrementally lowering my standards. I could wrap my mind around those things. It's when alcohol totally took over my life and that elevator dropped like it was broken, like the cable broke and dropped to the basement all at once. That's when I realized that I had a problem. But all these other things kept happening. It's like the universe kept trying to show me that I was having this problem, and the problems would escalate little by little. Thankfully, it wasn't some legal issues, or I didn't drink and drive and crash or get a DUI, but it was other areas of my life that slippery slope came in. Here I am, an ethical, moral person, but I start making excuses at work about things or why something happened. Excuses are lies, little white lies. I used to call them improvements on the truth. I was married and I didn't want to tell my spouse how much money we were spending. And so I would try to hide the checkbook, even though we were spending it together. I would make these improvements on the truth in all aspects of my life, how to discipline the kids, how much, like I said, the finances, but it also came with my alcohol. So we'd drink a couple beers every night and that would be fine. But then that craving would kick off in myself and I'd go to clean the kitchen and slam a beer and shove that beer can to the bottom of the trash can, or go out to the garage and get a couple warm ones out of the case and shove them in the back of the ones in the refrigerator so that he wouldn't notice they were missing. Those improvements on the truth, which were lies, caused a huge wedge between me and my spouse. And we wound up getting divorced. And it was all alcoholism, the whole thing. And it crept into all areas of my life.
Yeah.
I wasn't showing up to work drunk, but I would get home and I would drink more and more. I had an office job eventually, and I would move my hours up so that I could get home before the kids got home. I told myself to give myself a mental break, but really it was to get that ease and comfort of that first drink before I got there, so I could breathe again before the kids walked in the door. But then I switched to hard alcohol, easier to, I would say I could drink it a little bit faster and feel better for the evening and not have to drink so much. Because those beer cans, who makes those little tiny cans? I think to myself, they were just everywhere. And so I switched to hard alcohol to find myself drinking more and more. It wasn't less and less like I thought it was going to do, to the point where I would be at home and I was not a barfly. So I must not be an alcoholic. I wasn't homeless under the bridge. I was at home with my kids, doing homework, watching a little TV and making dinner. I would, now this didn't happen every day, but we would do our homework and we'd be sitting in the living room. And I think, it's almost time to make dinner. Next commercial break. That's what I'll go do. To look up what felt like one commercial break away and see the dirty dishes in the sink and dinner. I made dinner. We ate already. Like I must have a brain tumor. I mean, I 1000% thought that I had a brain tumor and something was wrong with me, but I didn't dare go to the doctor, but subconsciously I probably knew that it was the alcohol is the thing, but consciously I could have passed a lie detector test to say I didn't have a problem, it just crept in that much. And those reasoning skills were gone. I was lying to myself because I was divorced by this time. I mean, there was nobody to lie to but me.
Right.
Like it made no sense. None.
Well, and I appreciate that ability to say, like, wasn't homeless underneath a bridge. Like that there is high functioning and alcoholism still happening. People are still showing up for jobs and cooking dinner and things like that. And yet, we can be in this cycle of addiction and, like you said, hiding it.
It is.
What do you feel like was so helpful for you in terms of that ability to be honest with yourself? Or
I had an incident work that I needed in my mind to cover up. I had, by this time, it was like I didn't even want to pay my bills. Like I had money in the bank, but I was waiting until the electricity was about to be turned off to pay it. Or looking out the window every day at the car I had it had a loan on it, like most people do, but not paying it and thinking any day they're going to repossess it. Boy, that might be easier not to, just to chill out, not have to worry about that stuff. It wasn't like I intentionally let my truck get repossessed, but it's like I put that on a shelf with all those critical incidents from work, with those, the dead kids and the people in wrecks and the death and the domestics. I just put them on this imaginary shelf and shoved them back on there along with my childhoods. Just didn't want to deal with it. Well, I had, by this point, let my truck get repossessed. Like, why? I was driving my work car to and from work. I'd stop at the grocery store. Who needs to go out anyway? It was an excuse to stay home and drink is what it was. I didn't need to go out and take the kids places. We were fine. I had a backyard playground and we did all the things where we lived. So who cares? I didn't want work to realize that. I did have that enough cognizance of my mind to think if they knew that I didn't have my own car, that there would be issues. So I lied about something to cover that up and went on with my life. When I told myself, this might be a little much. Like I really need to chill out like I used to. When I was in the Army, I could go to the field for a month, or when I was pregnant, not drink for a year and not worry about it. I need to chill out a little bit with the alcohol is what I told myself, because it's a daily thing now. So I told that white lie or improvement on the truth at work to cover up what was going on at home, to tell myself to chill out, to go home and drink just like I had for months, if not years before, without a thought in my mind. I went home and drank without even thinking about chilling out. Didn't dawn on me until I passed out in my chair right that night and woke up the next morning, put my uniform on, went into work. I was standing there at the photocopier and I thought to myself, oh, Marian, you drank last. You promised yourself you weren't going to do that. I knew then there was a problem. I knew that lie that I had told at work hit me like a ton of bricks. In fact, that whole shelf of imaginary things, all those traumas that I was helpless, hopeless, and not good enough about that were on that shelf came crashing down on my head. And I knew I had a problem. I knew I wanted to drink that moment to cover that up. Like there was no, that was my only solution.
Right.
And that was a good thing. That's what we call a bottom, right?
Yeah.
Like that's it. I felt like I was in quicksand and I was sinking, and and as hard as I was trying to pull out of it, there was no pulling out. And I knew that I couldn't solve it myself.
Yeah.
But it takes that pain, right?
Yeah,
That pain that's not going away. My solution wasn't working anymore, you know? I couldn't drink it away, like it was still there. And so I said I needed help. I went to a 30-day treatment center. That's hard to do as a first responder. You know, you
Yeah.
see,
Yes.
you hear all
Yep.
these people you deal with on the street that are going to treatment, you know, and here it's me.
Right.
All these people that I've judged for all these years and, you know, rolled my eyes when I had to go there 5 times. I'm going to where they go.
Mhm.
But I'm telling you, I needed that. I needed that 30 days to breathe.
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
to show me that I can survive this without alcohol, that I'm not the only one that goes through this. It affects everybody from Park Avenue to Park Bench.
Yes.
Like I was in there with doctors and nurses and judges and all kinds of people, and homeless people and work and laborers and in every walk of life.
It does discriminate, does
It
it?
doesn't.
Mhm.
No, not at all. So I conceded to my innermost self that I had a problem, went there and I could breathe. The next step was, though, I had to leave there. Oh my
no.
Right.
just hide here forever. Like
Right.
this is working for me. Can't I just stay?
Yeah.
But no, I had to get back to it. I had to leave there and figure out what that even meant. I had a friend pick me up. I went to a treatment center a couple hours from where she picked me up, and I thought she was bringing me home, and I didn't know how to navigate this thing. And she didn't bring me home. She brought me to the AA hall
Yeah.
in my hometown.
Wow.
Where I worked, where I policed, where I had arrested people
Right.
for the same problem I had,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And I was sitting in the truck and I was like, I have to get out. She goes, oh, perfect time for meeting. Yes, you need to go in there right now. And I was like, I can't do that. But here's the thing. I knew, I'm glad she did it that way. I'm glad she didn't warn me. I'm glad she
Yeah.
just did it, because if I had not done that, where would I find a solution once I got home? Now, AA is not for everybody.
Of course.
There's a million ways to get sober, but for me, I can't think of any other way to do it.
Yeah.
I had a problem with organized religion. I thought religion was for weak people. My parents told me how to make a success out of my life. I grew up in thinking that God was wrathful and punished us, and we were going to hell if we sinned or weren't good enough. So to me, I believed that there was something out there that was in charge of all things in the universe, but it wasn't for me. So I had to set that off to the side, and I had to figure out what that looked like in my world. And AA did it for me. That's what I needed to do. Walking into that room, though, as a police officer of at that time over 10 years, was probably one of the hardest things
Can't
I've
even
ever done.
imagine,
No.
yeah.
I walked in there and I bawled the first 3 meetings I went to, and I sat in a corner and I just lived. But I heard my exact emotions that surrounded my life coming from these people. It wasn't the details, you know, it was the similarities in
Yes.
there and how we handle life. And I listened to their solution, and their solution was this 12-step program. You know, these people that I had arrested or dealt with over and over loved me until I could love myself, because they were in there for a reason, court papers or not. They could forge their own
Yes.
court papers. They
Yeah.
can do that.
Yeah.
They were in there to find a solution.
Yeah.
And it was the same solution provided to me. And I couldn't have asked for a better way to do it, you know?
Yeah.
It definitely, without a doubt, was the foundation of my sobriety.
That's so
It's
beautiful.
such a powerful story.
Well, and can you talk a little bit about how you use that thing that helped you so much?
So I actually got out of law enforcement. I had to leave. I mean, I had told that lie. You can't have a police officer on your staff that has lied about something. Can't go to court then, and you know, like, and be expected to tell the truth.
Right.
So I moved on. I was just in mainstream society. I had to learn how to take all those things that I did in life that I didn't live up to my own standards and clean them up.
Mhm.
So I thought of myself like a trash can, right? I had to take that trash can of my life, of all the gross stuff that's in there, and I had to dump it out. I didn't throw it away. I took all that trash, and I with the help of a sponsor in the 12-step program, I got to dump that stuff out, take a scrub brush, not only clean up that trash, but clean the inside of that can, which is me. And then take all that cleaned up trash and put it back in me, because we can't get rid of the things we did in life,
Yeah.
but we can clean them up, and I can make amends and try to fix things. It's not apologies. It's how can I fix how I wronged you? What can I do to make this better? Actionable things that helped me clean up that trash, help me to use my past experience to help somebody else
Yes.
figure out
Yes.
that they've had the same issue and how they can clean up their mess of their life and use it to the good to help others. I had to figure out that I am not in charge of my life. I am the one that can do the next right thing over and over, but the outcomes come up to something greater than me. And that's where that religious piece gets muddied in there. I had to put religion to the side and just say, there's something out here bigger than me that is running the universe. It's no different than going to court, right? I put a case together. I do my best job over and over to put that case together. It's not up to me what the jury does or what the judge does. I have to let go of that control of the outcomes. I'm not in the outcome business anymore, and know that there's a bigger picture. Why did these things happen to me? Why did that event as a child happen to me? So I could be mad at God or whatever you want to call that thing that runs the universe, but really, why would I don't need to be mad at God. These are things, I think, those catalysts in life that help us move that little trajectory over are the things that make it good, right?
Yeah.
I had this thing happen to me, and I felt like I wasn't good enough for my mother, to be honest with you. It wasn't the assault. That's why I say it doesn't matter what happened to you. I felt like I didn't live up to my mother's standards. Like if I believe that this bad thing happened to me and she does it, what kind of a child lies about that in my mind? That's what made me not feel like I fit in. And so I had to realize that wasn't true. My mom had her own points of view. I have my own points of view. I just need to figure out those things in life. And maybe that's what that event was supposed to do for me.
Yeah.
So I can figure these things out in life, because I don't regret that happening to me now. Like I could have lived as a victim or in bitterness forever about that.
Yep.
But instead I chose to use that as a springboard to bring me to where I am in life, to help other people realize that they don't have to live in victim mentality either.
Yeah.
And that's how I can police now. I love it. I don't have to sit there, judge somebody like, why are you doing this over and over? Just give them that little bit of hope that those things can show them the proper way to live, which is unconditional love of everything. I'm never going to be perfect at that, is the thing.
Right.
So I can
Correct.
unconditionally love maybe my kids, but I do unconditionally love my kids, but I put expectations on them.
Yeah.
Do good, or I might be mad, or I'm not going to give you your allowance, or I'm going to take your cell phone away. That's life, right? But that is not what my higher power has for me. My higher power loves me unconditionally. It's my self-will that puts all that judgment on myself
Right.
of these things. And that's what I had to learn. I'm in control of my emotions and what surrounds them and how I choose to apply them. I can be sad or angry, but then how can I balance that out with the wisdom to unconditionally love it anyway? I don't love the fact that I was assaulted as a child, but I have to try. I have to try to see the good that came out of that, and that's to me the essence of life.
Well, also, I think that's the essence,
Yes.
and like you said, to finally have to sit in all things that we were,
Yeah.
And that's your work, that's the work that you've done. And I think it's beautiful how it's such a fire in you that you want to give to others as well. You wanted to catch of others' experiences
I do.
and their struggles.
Not only the people that I deal with on the street, but also in the first responder community.
Yeah.
Because we're all in the same boat. We want to put on this armor. You know what I mean? Like we're this rough, tough thing and nothing can break through my armor, but that armor's rusty. It needs to be cleaned up. We need to know when to take that armor off and be vulnerable and feel the emotions versus having to wear it at work, to survive those events.
And never take it off.
I know. Never take it off. So how do you feed yourself? How do you
Right.
take care of yourself when you're walking around in this rusty armor?
Well, and I think that's Ashlee and I, a little bit of our compassion here and our love and our work with the podcast is like, how is it when there's somebody at the dinner table with armor on? Like how does that impact, how do they function or that? And of course, our goal is for that, take that armor off and be there with.
It is.
Absolutely.
It is.
If there was I don't want to, because we could keep you for 20 years for sure, because your story is so powerful. And I really can't wait for people to hear this episode. And if there is somebody right now who is listening and is struggling in any kind, you know what I mean? Like, is there any words of advice that you would want to give to somebody?
I would say if you are struggling, especially with substance abuse, reach out.
Yeah.
Hear somebody else's story, not just mine. There's online first responder meetings that you can go and listen to everybody's story. And if you can connect or resonate with what they're saying, start investigating that with yourself,
I
with
love
somebody
that.
who's been through it.
I love
Because that's the key. It almost seems like judgment when it comes from the outside, when people are pointing things out to you. But if you can find someone who's been through the fire already that you can relate to and identify with, start listening to them and see, because it's all self-reflection.
Yeah.
Like you guys mean well, and therapy is needed. Therapy is so needed for me to realize these things in myself. But sometimes we feel judged
Yeah.
when we go in there.
Sure.
So you need a combination of both. Somebody who's been through it themselves, along with you mental health professionals that can point out these subconscious mind things, because that's the key too, is to be able to see what the problem is. And you guys have all the training for that.
I do think that's a beautiful tenet of the 12 steps is how you give back
Yeah.
to
Yes.
that community that helps somebody, I just, especially
And it's such a safe zone
Yeah.
because no one is going to leave there and talk about what you just shared or what you've been through.
because we've all been.
Yeah, we have.
Anything else that would be to share before we wrap up?
We don't like to admit fear as first responders.
What?
We're not afraid of anything. I'll run into the gunfire.
Yeah.
But fear is healthy. It's a healthy emotion
Yes.
to recognize, but transcend, because that's what we do, right? We have fear when there's
Yeah,
gunshots.
of course.
We just run
Move
through it
past
anyway. You're right. And so do that with your personal life. Get through those things. Yes. It doesn't just apply to work. Go through it, feel the pain, feel the emotions, and
Have the
get to the
hard
other side.
conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on today.
Yes.
I think that, again, I know there's always these episodes where I'm like, we're going to get hounded because people are going to want you now a lot.
Well, they
They're
can
going to bring
always reach out to me.
Marian back on, and we can share some of that information if you're open to it, of
I am.
course, and we can post it on our socials and things like that as well, because I don't know, I know this is substance abuse was something that we knew we needed to start covering on this podcast.
Wing for sure.
But to be honest, like I've learned so much from you, and I know Jennifer hasn't, so we were both like, well, it has to come from Mary. It has to come from Mary, and it can't come from us. You know what I mean? And so honestly, to have you here to listen, I can listen all day and continue to learn, and I'm just so thankful. So
Well, thank you for having me.
yeah, absolutely. Jennifer, anything you want to wrap up with? I know. All right. Well, you guys know the routine that when the call hits home, Jennifer and I are here for you, and we can't wait for the next episode.